What's up? You're in the frame with me, Julie, and today we're going to talk about 5 more ways to move to a new country. I did a part 1 of this video already, so if you missed it or if you need a little recap, you can just click on the info button over there, or I'll link it in the description. And I got some suggestions from you guys, and I learned about some new ways that you can move abroad, either long-term or short-term, temporarily or permanently. And so we're gonna go through those now. Cool. So I'm gonna number these 6 to 10. So there's continuity and shit, and there will be a link to my 2 blog posts as well with real life examples, including my girl who moved from South Africa to Hong Kong, someone who moved from the UK to Saudi Arabia and now Bermuda, doing all sorts of different things, work-wise, etc. So cool, stay tuned, let's go. So number 6 is to be an au pair. An au pair is essentially a nanny for a family. Most of the time it's a cultural exchange sort of thing. A family in a particular country wants to expose their kids to a new culture, perhaps practice this particular language. So you live in the house of the family and it's just discussed with them ahead of time what your hours are, what your specific role is. Some of them it is actually childcare depending on the ages of the kids. Some of them, the kids will be in school usually, so maybe they'll just drop them off and then pick them up and help them with homework later. Some of them, it's more maybe they're homeschooled or something like that, so it's up to you to just speak to the family and see what is expected of you and if that's okay with both parties. For the most part, it includes meals and things like an allowance, sometimes even use of the car, depending on what kind of area that they might live in. And so most of the time it's a cultural exchange on both parts. Even though I've mentioned sometimes the parents want the kids to learn, whether it's a language or just about a different part of the world, or even a subject that somebody might be good in. Maybe somebody has a degree in something specific and they want a tutor for their kids, a live-in tutor. It can be that too. But usually the au pair also has chosen to do this because they want to experience a new country. So they get to live with an actual local family, just ordinary people. And a lot of the time, I think usually it'll go from 3 months to anywhere from a year onwards. The arrangements can be very flexible. So that brings me to pros and cons. Pros, you get a free house and you get a family if you're into that. Another pro is you're generally quite flexible because most of the time it's kids of school age, so they're going to school during the day and you have your day to yourself. Another pro is for a lot of countries, a cultural exchange like this or au pairing is a valid reason to get a visa, and sometimes a specific visa. So you have help from your host family as with an invitation letter and everything like that. And it's not so difficult to spend 3 months or more in the country that you've chosen to go to. Cons. Maybe it's not really a con, but you do have to want to, or at least be comfortable with working with and taking care of kids of different ages. Another con is you don't 100% have your own space. You live in somebody else's house, and even though they might become family, it's their house and it's their rules, and some people are not into that. Another con is, of course, there can be disagreements and you might not be able to gel well, even though most reputable agencies or websites like aupairworld.com, you can check that out if you're interested in seeing how it goes, involve screening, and you will of course choose from profiles with detailed information about each party, and you'll most likely have video calls, Skype interviews before you decide you're going to go and live in this house, and before the people decide that they're going to trust you with their house, their family, their kids and everything. There can still be disagreements and there can still be huge culture clashes, and there are some messed up stories I've seen on YouTube of people being kicked out of the house where they were au pairing and just really not having a good time. So a lot of the time you can't really tell how it's going to be until you get to the house and live with people. Like, things come out when you sleep under the same roof as people, you know what I mean? So that's something to think about. The best thing is to just make sure that you both understand what the expectations are from both sides. So find out from them what they need, what hours they need, what you get in terms of food or some sort of allowance, use of a car, where exactly they live, because it might be some village in the countryside and you thought you were going to Paris, but it's actually like an hour outside of Paris, that sort of thing, you know? So best thing is to just ask all the questions you need to know, because this is where you're going to be living and you need to be comfortable if you're going to take care of the kids well and you're both going to get something out of it. So au pairing, something to think about. Way number 7 to move abroad. I'm going to group this all together and call it working in transit. So this can mean being a flight attendant, this can mean being crew, on a cruise ship or a yacht, being staff on a cruise. So that can be all sorts of things, from animation to photographer to hosting to servers to chefs to beauty therapists, all sorts of work on cruise ship. And a lot of these are short term, but they can be life changing. The ones that I really enjoy watching and following are stories from flight attendants. So there's Miss Fernandez here on YouTube, who was a former Emirates flight attendant for 7 years, and she moved to Dubai from Australia because Emirates, of course, is based in Dubai. So that was her base, and she got to travel, obviously, so much. And on top of that, at least with airline staff, that means as well as pilots and probably admin staff and people who are not on the plane itself but work for the airline, get huge discounts on airfare for themselves and for a number of family members. So I meet a lot of people who travel because they get sometimes free tickets because they're the flight attendant, or their sister, their mom, their girlfriend or boyfriend works for the airline, and they add them to their, like, I don't know, family list or whatever, and they get huge discounts, so they're able to travel. But as far as people moving, you can think about working in travel. So pros of this are, that depends whether you like to travel much or not. Some people want to move abroad and stay in one place. Some people want to move abroad because they love traveling. So this is for the people who like to move around. I've mentioned flight attendants going all different sorts of places and living in the headquarters of the airline. People who work on yachts and cruises also get to do that and meet lots of different people every day. So that's really cool. Your job, a lot of the time with these things, revolves around people, interacting with people. Pros, you have the chance of working with very big airlines because they don't just recruit from their own countries. A big airline like Emirates will recruit worldwide. I have actually seen Facebook ads of cabin crew recruitment for not just Kenyan or South African airlines, but Qatar Air, Emirates, British Airways, whoever, who are based in the countries of their names. And what's cool is they don't, I really don't think they discriminate as far as nationalities that they hire. Some cons, I think that it can get old for some people, particularly the moving around and just like the unusual lifestyle. I've heard people say that it's not always easy to have an ordinary friendships and relationships because you're always on the go, or you're in this weird little world. And so you end up just being friends with or dating or like ending up with skippers on the yacht or other flight attendants or the pilots or whatever. And I think that it is one of those things that it's just like it's a bubble on its own. It's an industry bubble, so some people are not into that. But again, it can be a short-term thing. Some people will go into it for a few months, like I said, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years or more, and move on to other employment or other opportunities in life. So if you feel like that's something that you would enjoy, traveling often and working in transit, then that's something to think about. Number 6 is to teach a language or teach your second language in a foreign country. So this is extremely popular in Southeast Asia. A lot of people from the US, the UK, a lot of South Africans and Australians will go to Thailand, Cambodia, China, even Japan, and be English teachers. Foreign teachers, or what's called native speakers, are paid a lot of money depending on experience, qualifications, but it's very easy to just get a TEFL certificate online that's teaching English as a foreign language. You can get it done in a month or less. You just do it all online and then you're a qualified teacher. Other people are actual teachers who have got degrees in education and things like that, and some places don't really check for that. They give you lesson plans, and as long as you have a clear accent, then you're cool. So you go and you might teach privately, but most of the time there are language centers or there are kindergartens and things like that, and they just go, they teach English. A lot of them are part-time, maybe like half days, 5 days a week, and get paid tons of money, like anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a month, which is major. This is something that you can research, whatever language it is you speak. You can also look up what's available, what schools are looking for who, and you might be able to move abroad as a language teacher. For a lot of the contracts will be from 6 months onwards, and of course are renewable. So a lot of people will live for 1, 2, 3 years abroad, make really good money, save, and come back home with like not having blown all their money traveling, actually having coming back with more money than they did when they went abroad, which is the dream. That has never happened to me. Pros, like I've mentioned, particularly for Southeast Asia, it's like huge salaries and a low cost of living. So you're able to save, you're able to travel if you like, and just live quite well. And a lot of people end up staying because they just prefer the way of life in a lot of these Southeast Asian countries. Another pro is it's not too difficult in most cases to get qualified. You don't necessarily have to be a career teacher and somebody who has got a degree in education. You can, like I said, get a TEFL certificate online. I know some people who have photoshopped theirs. Another pro, often again in Southeast Asia, because that's the most information I have. The region I know best in this field is that the company or the school or whoever has hired you will usually set you up really nicely. They'll fly you over, they'll help you with a visa if you need to, with whatever supporting documents, and a lot of the time rent is covered, if not for the whole time, then for your first 1 or 2 months. So you have such important support getting set up in a new country, which is amazing. Cons, a lot of the time, these things are partial to what they call native speakers. I have taught English before online in the city where I was living in South Africa, but I still check out a few opportunities now and then, and they insist on having native English speakers, even though you can hear my accent. And I was a really good teacher when I did teach. I'm from Kenya and my passport is Kenyan, and that's not considered a native speaker. Somebody has to be from the UK, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and in some cases even South Africa. Lol. Another con is I think it's become so popular and such a trend that people go in without really thinking about it. And when people suggest this to me as a means of traveling and being able to save as much money as possible, and even going to Asia, because I've never been to Asia at all and I'm dying to, for me and probably for a lot of people, you have to think about the fact that the money is nice, but I personally am not interested in being a full-time teacher. Like, that's not necessarily what I want to do. That's not my passion. So I don't know if it's worth it. I think that it might be one of those situations where you're doing it for the money but not enjoying your occupation and everything like that. So that's something to think about. It sounds like an easy win, but if you don't really want to be a teacher and you don't know if you'll be placed with young kids or adults who don't respect you or whatever, that's the thing you need to think about and you need to learn to deal with. So possible con. But teaching a language abroad, look into that depending on what languages you speak. Probably Mandarin is really useful by now. I think Spanish is popular, even Swahili in some parts of the world. Number 9 might also be a bit more of a temporary one, or it also can complement a few of these things, but you can house sit. So house sitting means, of course, taking care of somebody's house while they are away. This goes for people with pets or plants or that sort of thing, that they want somebody to be in the house taking care of it while they're not in town or in the country. And because there are people with all this money who have multiple homes around the world, it might be like this is their like summer home, and like when they're in their normal life going to work, and they might need someone a few months a year, or they have a bunch of homes in the same city but they of course live in one. They don't need it all at the same time, but it's nice to have someone to water your plants, make sure it's clean and it doesn't get dusty, and just to help someone out. So somebody who I personally know and who I spoke to about this, I will put the link below to the blog post, is Baker. Baker's from New Zealand and he travels around the world working full-time. He and his fiance are full-time English teachers online, and they go around and they house sit all over the world. So wherever they are able to go for 3 months at a time, visa free. I met him in Cape Town. They'll go, they will have an arrangement with the owner of the house, and they'll go to work every day at a co-working space. Maybe they want to work in the house, there might be Wi-Fi available, and they'll just do their job every day, so they have cash to live, to eat and everything, but they have a free house as long as they of course take care of it. If there are pets, they feed them, they walk them, and sometimes they even have use of a car. So again, there is a trust issue. Somebody needs to be able to trust you with their home, with their beloved pets and plants and belongings, collections of cool stuff or whatever they might have in their house. So there are websites like trustedhousesitters.com, which you can check out down here. So it's one of those things, you create a profile. I think there is an annual fee, so you pay. I think that goes to a background check though, which is the reason it's there and the reason it is the price that it is. Go see. So a background check is done by the website, and so they assure that you're a clean person but you set up your profile, you put up information about yourself generally, and there are of course reviews, previous people who you've house sat for, and vice versa. Most likely they'll write you a review as well after you've left their house, and just say things like, took good care of our place, no damage, you know. So there is that website. There's probably things like Facebook groups and word of mouth and everything like that to get these sorts of gigs, I would say. So for the most part, there is no exchange in money, but there are actually people who go on to be professional house sitters and charge daily rates, weekly rates, whatever. And there are house sitting agencies as well. So it might be worth looking into that too. And lastly, number 10. This might sound like a joke to you, like I'm just taking the piss, but I think there is something to it. You can invest or start a business in a new country. So a lot of governments really, really encourage this by making shit extremely easy for foreign investors to come in and start businesses, to invest in certain different industries, because they're really struggling. And so it'll sound like a ridiculous joke, but there's of course a catch to things. So I'll give you one example. I've read more than one article about little towns in Italy, and the headline will be like, this Italian town is giving away castles for €1 each. And they really are doing that. You buy a castle or whatever for €1. The thing is, you have to commit to restoring it, or you have to commit to living in the town because too many young people are moving to bigger cities in Italy and blah, blah, blah. So there are things like that. I know a lot of Caribbean islands also kind of like pay investors or allow investors to live tax-free or things like that. There are all sorts of different arrangements to it. So look into it, and it might be easier and not as expensive as you would expect. For example, a lot of this has to do with buying property. And of course, in a lot of beautiful resort towns that are becoming or have become tourist hotspots, often there's some foreign investment. Somebody came and they saw, this is property that I can afford. This is not as expensive as I might have thought, or not as expensive as where I'm from. So they'll come and just make a little B&B, or they'll come and they'll start, I don't know, some sort of like little training center for whatever their expertise is, or some sort of festival or whatever, and they have support from the government because they're investing in the country's economy. Something to think about. When I'm like richer, I would absolutely think about that. But you get a castle for €1, but you do have to restore it. That specific story, if I can find it again, I'll link it in the description. But yeah, so pros are support from bureaucracy. Like I've said in all of these 10 ways to live abroad, bureaucracy and visas, immigration, governments are one of the biggest blocks of moving to a different country, and why a lot of people don't even try and go into it, because it just sounds like so much. So you have support from them. Cons, I mean, not everybody's investments pay off, I suppose. It's one of those gambles. So yeah. So think about investing, starting business, or buying property in a foreign land, and see what the regulations are and what doors might be open that you just haven't heard about before. Alright, so that's it from me, guys. Those are my 10 different ways to move to a new country, either temporarily or permanently. A lot of the time, if you move somewhere temporarily, because you are there and you are making connections and you are figuring out how things work on the ground, that you are able to then move permanently because you have information and you can see where you can fit in the society. You know what I'm saying? I know it sounds really crafty, but like in a genuine way, if you do it properly, you know, legally and shit. So that's it for me. Comment below if you have any more, if you have ever done any of these things, moved abroad. If you have moved abroad in a completely different way, please tell us. And remember to check out my 2 blog posts with Sia, Baker, Vanessa, and Gemma, who have all moved to different areas in different ways. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe to my channel if you're into that. And I will see you next time. Cool. Bye. Be cool.